On Saturday, December 6th of 2008, it was a typical cool morning. The Cajun Country Marathon at the time was a half-on, half-off-road marathon that was taking place in Lafayette. A runner was warming up prior to the event and had stepped off of one of the trails to relieve himself. And when doing so, he located a female, obviously deceased, and he notified the local sheriff's deputies that were working the race off duty.
Sergeant Bajar makes his way to the crime scene, just off Lajeunesse Road, an area surrounded by thick southern oak and cypress.
The body of the victim was about 20 yards inside the woods from the roadway. The victim was a white female. She was in her mid-40s. Her arms were above her head, and there was a significant amount of blood in the area. The most obvious injury that we were able to tell was that her neck had been cut. Very deep and possibly multiple times. She was still fully clothed. Her pants were unbuttoned, but it didn't appear that the victim had been sexually assaulted. At the time that this occurred, I was on the force for nearly 8 years, and this was probably one of the bloodiest scenes that I had seen.
Since the body was found with no animal activity or no kind of decomposition, which happens very fast here in South Louisiana, it led us to believe that she had not been there very long.
We were unable to find any identification, any type of purse, any type of personal belongings. There was only one thing that was located in her pocket, and that was a room key to a local hotel.
The key belongs to room 46 at the Regency Inn. As the crow flies, it's located 5 miles from the crime scene.
We were able to locate a female who said that her friend, Bonnie Ruphard, had not returned from the evening before. We learned that Bonnie Ruphard was in her late 40s. She wasn't a resident of this area. She was from Illinois. With the hotel key and the statement that we obtained from the friend that we interviewed, we were fairly confident that Bonnie was the individual that we found off of Lajeunesse Road.
Fingerprints confirm the victim as 47-year-old Bonnie Faye Ruphard. Police discover Bonnie is part of a traveling group. She's been sharing a room with the man she mentioned to her daughter. His name is Lambert Hatfield, and their relationship is rocky.
We had learned that there was a domestic incident that had several months prior out of state, where it was reported that Lambert was intoxicated and had struck Bonnie, which led her to go to a women's shelter and to get a stay-away order against him. Bonnie had checked into the women's shelter and then had checked out, stating that she was traveling to Mississippi to do some work, which obviously wasn't the case because she ended up here in Lafayette with Lambert.
Investigators bring Lambert in for questioning.
Lambert said that the last time he saw Bonnie was the Friday morning prior to her death, and that as he left to go to work, she was still sleeping in the hotel room.
Lambert denies any involvement in Bonnie's murder.
Lambert said that Bonnie would disappear on occasion and that she would perform sex acts as a form of revenue so that she could purchase narcotics. Lambert's clothing was also looked at closely. His shoes were inspected, not only for blood or trace evidence, but for the tread on the soles. And that was compared to any type of tread that we located on the scene, and none of those matched, and no physical evidence of blood was found on his shoes. The amount of cooperation that he extended towards us, the lack of physical injuries, and just the way that he presented himself led us to believe that he wasn't involved in the murder. On December 8th, 2008, an autopsy was conducted on Bonnie at the Lafayette Parish Coroner's Office. The initial thought that Bonnie wasn't sexually assaulted was confirmed. The pathologist discovered that Bonnie was stabbed 11 times on her back and shoulders. She was struck with a blunt object approximately 4 times on her head, and that her throat was slashed 6 times.
Bonnie's battle with her killer may well provide detectives with the evidence to catch him.
During the autopsy, It's standard procedure to get nail scrapings. In the case of Bonnie, there was skin that was located underneath her fingernails.
While documenting the bloodstains on Bonnie Ruphard's shoes, a 90-degree drop was located near her laces and on the toe of her shoe.
As the family grieves, detectives receive results from the lab.
10 days after submitting the blood swabs and fingernail scrapings from Bonnie to the Acadiana Crime Lab, we received a full DNA profile of a white male. So we were fairly confident that this was the blood and DNA profile of our suspect.
The sample was entered into CODIS, but the national database where the DNA is stored, you have to commit a felony or a violent crime. It did not match to anybody in the database at the time.
The lead investigator in Bonnie's case worked diligently for months, exhausted all leads, exhausted all tips, and ultimately she decided to suspend the case.
After a year, the case of the murdered grandmother grows as cold as the dark December waters of the bayou. Though Bonnie's case sits on the shelf, the crime lab continues to run DNA samples through CODIS, looking for a match to their suspect. Then, something catches a specialist's eye.
One of the lab technicians recognized a familial trait on the Y chromosome. That familial trait ran in the Hebert family. So if you were a male with the last name Hebert, or your father had the last name Hebert, you were likely to carry this trait. So while there was still no hit in the database, you now had a last name.
By 2013, I had been transferred to our homicide violent crimes section. And upon my arrival in that section, I requested that I be assigned Bonnie's case.
For 4 years, Sergeant Bajar collects voluntary DNA samples from Hebert family members and keeps plugging them into the system without a hit. Until a surprise phone call turns this stone-cold investigation red hot.
So in March of 2018, 10 years after Bonnie's murder took place, I was building a shed in the back of my house and I received a phone call from the crime lab. And the technician who I'd worked with for years was extremely excited on the other side of the phone, saying, "We got him, we got him." And when she finally calmed down, she said that she had a match to the suspect DNA in Bonnie's case, and that he had been arrested on a drug charge and booked into the Lafayette Parish Correctional Center, where they obtained a swab from him during the booking process. And in fact, that it was an Hebert, and it was an individual by the name of Millard Hebert.
What is this about? This is about a case that happened in 2008. Your blood and your skin was on her body, okay?
Within 30 seconds, Millard just started talking and without even being asked a question.
I picked her up, I believe, on Cameron Street. I'll tell you, yeah, that I remember. It was on meth. I picked her up high and we rode around. Pulled off on the side there and got out the truck in the back and started fighting, and I strangled her. I freaked out. I just couldn't stop. Was there an altercation? I mean, was there an argument? Was that? Yeah, money for sex. That's what it was about.
Millard Hebert pleads guilty to manslaughter and is sentenced to 20 years in prison.
The fact that Millard openly came out and confessed made it seem like this had been a burden that had been bearing down on him for 10 years. He knew how brutal it was. He was disgusted by it. I believe Millard was truly remorseful in what he had done.